The morning sun poured through the thin curtains of a small living room. A faint sound of birds echoed from outside, mixing softly with the faint humming of an old refrigerator. In that quiet room sat a little girl, her legs barely reaching the floor, staring curiously at a dusty keyboard her father had brought home from a thrift shop. Most of the keys didn't even work properly. Some were stuck, some made no sound at all, but to her it looked like treasure. She pressed a few buttons and a weak, crackling sound came out. Instead of being disappointed, she smiled. It was as if she had just discovered magic. Her mother was folding laundry nearby when she heard the sound. "It's broken," she said softly, not wanting to crush the girl's excitement. But the child didn't seem to care. She pressed one note again and again, then another, trying to make some kind of tune. Within minutes, something strange happened. She began to move her fingers in rhythm, creating a small melody from the few working keys. Her mother paused, amazed at how the girl seemed to understand the pattern of sound without anyone showing her how. That afternoon, when her father returned from work, his daughter ran to him, proudly saying, "Listen to this." She sat down and played the same little melody again. It was clumsy, uneven, but there was something beautiful in it. Her father chuckled, but then froze as she started adding new notes, new patterns, like she was composing something on the spot. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. The girl shrugged. "It just sounds nice," she said with a grin. The days passed, and what began as random curiosity turned into obsession. Every morning before school, and every evening after dinner, she would sit at the broken keyboard. She didn't care that half of it didn't work. She played with whatever keys made sound and built her own tunes. Sometimes she would hum along. Other times she would close her eyes, completely lost in the little world of her imagination. Her parents didn't think much of it at first. Children often find short-lived hobbies, drawing, dancing, building things with cardboard. But this was different. Even when her friends came over to play, she preferred to sit by her keyboard trying to make something new. She didn't use sheet music. She didn't even know what notes were called. She just listened and repeated what she heard. One rainy evening, the power went out. The family sat together, listening to the rain tapping on the windows. Her mother was lighting candles when she noticed her daughter tapping her fingers on the table, copying the rhythm of the rain. She began to hum softly, creating a tune out of it. Her father listened carefully. The melody was so sweet and calming that it made the small, dark room feel warm. He reached for his phone, recording a short video of her. It wasn't meant for the world, just a memory for themselves. The next day, he showed it to a coworker who loved music. The man was shocked. "She has perfect pitch," he said, explaining that not many people could identify or reproduce a note without hearing it first. "She can hear a sound and match it exactly. That's rare." The father didn't understand much about music, but he knew that what his daughter was doing felt special. A few days later, a neighbor stopped by. She was a retired piano teacher who had taught children for more than 30 years. When she heard the girl play on her old keyboard, she laughed softly. "How long has she been learning?" she asked. "Learning?" the mother replied. "She just started playing one day. Nobody taught her." The teacher frowned in disbelief. She asked if she could test something. She hummed a few random notes and told the girl to play them back. Without hesitation, the child pressed the correct keys, matching the tone perfectly. The woman looked at her parents and said quietly, "You need to get her a real piano." Of course, that was easier said than done. The family didn't have much money. Both parents worked hard to pay rent and bills. A proper piano was far beyond what they could afford. Still, they didn't want to ignore this gift. The neighbor, seeing their struggle, offered her own help. She had an old upright piano sitting unused in her house. It wasn't new, but it still worked fine. "She can use it," the teacher said. "Music like that shouldn't be wasted." When the piano was brought into their small living room, the little girl's eyes lit up. She ran her fingers across the shiny keys and let out a small laugh. The first sound she produced was uneven, but she kept trying, adjusting her fingers naturally. Within a week, she was playing small songs she had heard on television. Within a month, she could copy entire pieces after listening to them once. Her teacher was amazed. Most children took years to learn simple notes, but this girl was learning entire songs by ear in minutes. The girl didn't know she was different. To her, playing piano was like breathing. She didn't think about the notes or techniques. She just felt the music. Sometimes she would play fast, other times slow, depending on her mood. She often said the piano spoke to her, that the keys told her what they wanted to say. Her teacher would smile each time, amazed by the child's innocent understanding of something so complex. As months went by, her skill grew at an unbelievable pace. People from the neighborhood started dropping by to listen. Some brought cookies, some just stood quietly by the door. The living room would fill with warmth and music every weekend. The girl would play for everyone without hesitation, smiling shyly when they clapped. She never asked for praise. She just liked to see people happy. One afternoon, the teacher decided to test her with something harder. She placed a piece of music on the stand, one that professional players often struggled with. It was full of rapid changes, difficult transitions, and quick notes. "Can you try this?" the teacher asked gently. The girl glanced at the sheet for a moment and shook her head. "I can't read this," she said. But before the teacher could respond, the girl asked if she could listen to someone playing it. The teacher found a recording and played it once. The little girl listened carefully, eyes closed, fingers twitching slightly as if she were feeling the music in the air. When the recording stopped, she said softly, "Okay, I got it." Then she began to play. Every note flowed smoothly, her timing perfect. The teacher stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly. It was impossible for someone so young, especially without reading music. When the piece ended, silence filled the room. The teacher wiped a tear from her eye and whispered, "You have a gift from heaven." News of the girl's talent spread quickly through the small town. Someone uploaded a short clip of her playing to social media. Within days, the video went viral. People around the world commented in disbelief. "Is this real?" one person wrote. "How can a child play like that?" Others said she reminded them of the great prodigies from history. Reporters began calling and music schools sent invitations. But the family remained humble. They turned down many offers, afraid that fame might take away the child's innocence. Despite the sudden attention, the girl stayed the same. She still went to school, played with her friends, and practiced piano every evening. But something inside her was growing. Each time she touched the keys, she discovered new ways to express herself. The piano became her diary, her way of speaking when words weren't enough. Her parents often sat quietly, watching her. They didn't understand how she did it, but they knew she was doing something extraordinary. Her father would sometimes whisper, "It's like she's been here before," like an old soul trapped in a child's body. Her mother would nod, holding back tears of pride. One evening, the local radio station invited her to perform live. It was her first time playing in front of microphones and cameras. The studio was small but packed with people eager to see the young genius. She sat calmly, her feet barely touching the pedals, and began to play. The moment her fingers touched the keys, the room went silent. Every note she played felt alive, filled with emotion far beyond her age. When she finished, even the radio host, a man who had interviewed hundreds of artists, couldn't speak for a few seconds. "You're not just playing notes," he finally said. "You're telling a story." The recording of that performance spread even faster online. Musicians from around the world commented on her control, her emotion, her natural rhythm. Some called her a miracle. Others said she was a reminder of what pure music really meant. But for her, it was still just fun. When someone asked how she managed to play so perfectly, she simply said, "I just listened to the music inside my head." By now, her teacher had no doubt. This girl was meant for something bigger. She began preparing her for a national-level youth music competition. It would be her first major event, with real judges, a grand stage, and hundreds of people watching. The family hesitated at first, unsure if they could afford the trip. But when the town heard about it, everyone joined in to help. Some donated money, others baked goods and sold them to raise funds. Even the small cafe down the street put up a jar labeled, "For our little pianist." When the day finally came, the girl wore a simple white dress her mother had sewn. As they packed their bags, the mother knelt beside her and said, "Just remember, it's not about winning. It's about doing what you love." The girl smiled and nodded. "I just want to play," she said. That night before the journey, she sat at the piano one last time. The house was quiet, the lights dim. She began playing a soft tune, one she had written herself. It was slow and gentle, filled with emotion. Her parents stood in the doorway, listening silently. The melody seemed to tell their whole story, their struggles, their love, their hope. When she finished, she looked up and said, "Tomorrow I'll play something even better." They didn't know it yet, but the world was about to witness something no one had ever seen before. The little girl with the broken keyboard had grown into a prodigy who would soon leave an entire panel of judges speechless. Her journey had only just begun. The day of the competition invitation came quietly, without any hint that it would change everything. The little girl had been practicing on her old upright piano as usual. Her fingers danced lightly over the keys, playing a tune she had made herself. Her parents were sitting nearby, enjoying a rare, peaceful evening. Then suddenly there was a knock on the door. When her father opened it, a man stood outside holding a brown envelope. He smiled politely and said he was from the National Youth Music Foundation. Her parents exchanged confused looks. They had never heard of anything like that before. The man handed them the envelope and said, "Your daughter has been invited to perform at the National Youth Music Competition next month." He explained that a clip of her performance from the radio show had reached the foundation's directors, and they were stunned by her ability. "We've never seen anyone her age play like that," he said. The father opened the envelope and read the letter slowly, his hands trembling. It was official, a personal invitation for their daughter to perform among the country's top young musicians. Her mother covered her mouth in disbelief. The girl just looked at them, confused but curious. "Is it far?" she asked softly. Her father laughed nervously. "Yes," he said. "It's very far, but we'll find a way." That night, the little house was filled with mixed emotions: excitement, fear, pride, and worry. They didn't have much money, and the travel, the hotel, and the entry fees all cost more than they could handle. But their neighbor, the retired teacher, smiled when she heard the news. "Don't you worry about the money," she said kindly. "If the whole town could listen to her play, the whole town can help her go." And that's exactly what happened. Within a few days, everyone started helping in their own ways. The bakery donated a portion of their weekly sales. The school organized a small concert where the girl performed, and the collected donations went toward her travel expenses. Even strangers who had seen her video online sent small amounts through the teacher's account. The family was overwhelmed by the kindness. While her parents worked out the travel plans, the girl focused only on one thing: her music. She didn't think about the stage or the judges or the competition. All she cared about was playing better than before. Her teacher began giving her extra lessons, introducing her to complex classical pieces. But every time the teacher showed her sheet music, the girl would tilt her head and say, "Can you play it once first?" Then, after listening, she would play it perfectly from memory. Sometimes she even changed the tempo slightly, making it sound softer, more emotional. The teacher didn't correct her. She knew that the girl wasn't just copying, she was creating her own version. It was rare to see such understanding in a child so young. The teacher also started teaching her about performance, the importance of confidence, posture, and calmness on stage. But the girl seemed naturally comfortable. She didn't show signs of nervousness or fear. "What if you make a mistake?" the teacher once asked. The child smiled and said, "Then I'll make the next note sound right." That answer stayed with the teacher forever. As the days passed, the small living room filled with new melodies. The sound of the piano became part of the neighborhood's daily rhythm. People walking by would pause just to listen. Even children playing outside would stop and peek through the window. The girl never complained, never asked for rest. Sometimes she would practice until her small fingers turned red, but she never seemed tired. One evening, her mother brought her a cup of warm milk and said softly, "You don't have to do this for us. We're already proud of you." The girl looked up from the piano and smiled. "I'm not doing it for anyone," she said. "When I play, it feels like the music is talking to me. I just follow where it goes." Her father recorded short clips of her practice sessions and sent them to the foundation as requested. A few days later, he received an email from one of the judges. It said, "Her style is unique. We're very excited to see her in person." That message gave the whole family hope. The week before the trip, the teacher came with a surprise. She handed the girl a small music box. When opened, it played a gentle piano tune. "I bought this when I first started teaching," the teacher said. "It always reminded me that music is more than notes, it's emotion. Take it with you." The girl hugged her tightly and promised to play her best. The morning of their journey arrived. The family woke before dawn. The mother had packed their few belongings in a small suitcase along with the white dress she had sewn herself. The father carefully wrapped the invitation letter and travel documents. They took a bus to the train station, their teacher and a few neighbors coming along to see them off. As the train started moving, the little girl pressed her face to the window, watching the familiar streets fade away. Her teacher waved and shouted, "Play with your heart, not your hands." The journey was long, but the girl didn't complain once. She spent most of the time tapping her fingers on her knees, imagining melodies. At one point, an elderly man sitting across from them noticed and asked, "Do you play the piano?" She nodded shyly. When her father explained where they were going, the man smiled warmly and said, "Then I hope the world listens carefully to what you play." When they finally reached the city, the family was amazed. Tall buildings, bright lights, and crowds of people. It was a world completely different from their small town. The competition venue was even grander. It was a huge concert hall with marble floors and golden lights. Posters of famous musicians decorated the walls. The girl's parents stood in awe, but she seemed completely calm. She just looked at the grand piano on stage and whispered, "That one looks like it wants to sing." The next morning was registration day. There were dozens of children from all over the country, some older, some wearing fancy clothes, some accompanied by professional tutors. Their parents carried expensive music sheets and instruments. The girl stood quietly beside her parents, wearing her simple dress. A few people looked at her curiously, whispering that she was too young to compete. But she didn't seem to notice. She was too busy staring at the piano being tuned on stage. When it was her turn to register, one of the organizers recognized her name. "You're the girl from the radio video," she exclaimed. Soon a small crowd gathered around, asking questions. The girl answered politely but softly. The organizers were amazed when they learned she had never taken formal lessons or owned a professional piano. One of them said quietly to another, "If she can really play like that live, this competition might never be the same again." Back at the hotel, her parents could hardly sleep. They were worried about how she would handle the pressure. But the girl slept peacefully, her small hands resting over the little music box her teacher had given her. In the morning, she woke up early, stood by the window, and whispered to herself, "Just play like home." When they reached the venue again, the hall was already buzzing with excitement. Reporters were present, photographers clicking pictures of young talents. The smell of polished wood and stage lights filled the air. Her name was printed on the list beside much older contestants. The family sat quietly, waiting for her turn. During the warm-up session, some contestants were showing off difficult scales and fast runs, their fingers flying across the keys. Her father looked nervous. "Do you think you can play like them?" he asked. The girl looked at him with a gentle smile. "I don't want to play like them," she said. "I want to play like me." When the rehearsal began, the judges introduced themselves, renowned pianists, composers, and professors. Their expressions were serious and strict. The air was thick with tension. Some contestants stumbled under pressure, forgetting notes or missing beats. The judges barely reacted, making notes quietly. When it was her turn, she walked to the stage with calm steps. Her small frame looked almost fragile against the grand piano. The microphone picked up the soft sound of her breathing. The audience whispered among themselves. One of the judges leaned toward another and said, "Is this the 8-year-old?" The other nodded. She sat on the bench, adjusted the seat, and placed her hands on the keys. For a few seconds, she just looked at the piano as if she was talking to it silently. Then she closed her eyes and began to play. The hall went completely silent. Her fingers moved effortlessly, creating a flow of music so pure and emotional that even the judges leaned forward. She wasn't reading from any sheet. She was playing from her heart. The melody started soft and gentle like a whisper, then slowly grew stronger, filling the hall with a warmth that no one expected from a child. The audience could feel the emotion, hope, sadness, love, all in one song. When she finished, there was no immediate applause. It was as if everyone needed a moment to breathe again. Then the hall erupted in cheers. Even the strict judges nodded in appreciation. One of them said quietly, "That child doesn't just play notes, she plays truth." After she stepped down from the stage, her parents hugged her tightly. "You did it," her mother whispered, our voice trembling. The girl smiled and said, "I just played what I felt." Later that evening, the family sat together in their small hotel room, listening to the sounds of the city outside. The father looked at his daughter, still amazed. "No matter what happens tomorrow, you've already made us proud," he said. The girl simply nodded, her eyes shining. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "I'll play something faster." She didn't know it yet, but the next day would bring the moment that would make history, the challenge that would leave even the judges speechless, and the performance that would be remembered forever. The next morning, the competition hall was filled with excitement and tension. It was the final day of performances, and everyone could feel that something big was about to happen. The little girl sat quietly in the waiting area with her parents. Her mother gently brushed her hair while her father kept checking the list of performers. Around them, other children were nervously rehearsing or talking in hushed voices with their coaches, but she just sat there holding her little music box, humming softly to herself. The judges had decided to add something new for the final round, a surprise challenge to test creativity and skill under pressure. It wasn't part of the original plan, but one of the judges, a well-known composer, suggested it to make the competition more exciting. The rule was simple. Each contestant would receive a short, difficult musical piece they had never seen before. They would be given only 1 minute to look at it. Then they had to perform it live. It was a test of memory, technique, and quick understanding. When the announcement was made, the hall buzzed with whispers. Even the older contestants looked nervous. Some shook their heads, whispering that it was too hard. The girl, however, just listened quietly, her small hands resting calmly on her lap. Her father leaned down and whispered, "You don't have to win this. Just do your best." She smiled faintly and said, "I'll just listen to what the piano says." One by one, the contestants went up to the stage. Some did well, but others stumbled. The judges were strict, watching every note carefully. When one boy made a mistake, one of the judges sighed loudly, shaking his head. The pressure in the room grew heavier with each performance. Then it was her turn. Her name was called, and the audience turned their heads, expecting to see the same little girl from the previous day, the one who had played so gracefully. The lights softened as she walked to the stage. Her small shoes made quiet sounds against the wooden floor. She reached the grand piano, bowed politely, and sat down. A staff member handed her a single sheet of music. It was a modern, extremely complex piece, fast, filled with sudden changes and sharp rhythms. Even professionals would find it challenging. She looked at it for a few seconds, her eyes scanning the notes. The judges whispered among themselves. One of them said softly, "This is impossible for a child her age." After only a short pause, she placed the sheet aside. "I'm ready," she said softly. Her voice barely carried to the front row. One of the judges looked surprised. "All ready?" he asked. She nodded. The audience went silent. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. Her small fingers hovered above the keys. She closed her eyes for a brief second, took a deep breath, and then she began to play. What happened next made everyone forget to breathe. Her fingers moved at a speed that didn't seem human. In just 3 seconds, she played through the entire piece, every note sharp, clear, and perfectly placed. The melody burst out of the piano like a wave of lightning, powerful, precise, and unbelievably fast. When she finished, her hands froze mid-air, and the sound echoed across the hall for a few moments before fading into silence. No one moved. No one even clapped. The judges looked at each other, mouths slightly open, eyes wide in disbelief. One of them had dropped his pen. Another blinked rapidly as if trying to make sure he hadn't imagined it. Finally, someone in the back whispered, "Did she just play that whole piece?" In 3 seconds? It sounded impossible, but it had happened. The hall, which had been filled with noise moments earlier, was now frozen in awe. The girl looked up at the judges innocently, waiting for their response. Her feet barely touched the pedals, yet her control had been flawless. Her timing had been exact, and not a single note sounded wrong. It was like she had become one with the piano, her body simply following a rhythm her mind already knew. Then came the applause. Slow at first, then louder, then thunderous. The audience rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and even shouting. Some were laughing in disbelief, others were wiping tears from their eyes. The judges, still stunned, exchanged glances. The head judge, a stern man known for rarely showing emotion, leaned into his microphone and said, "Can you play that again?" The little girl smiled and nodded. She placed her hands back on the keys, and once again, she played the piece perfectly, almost effortlessly. The same 3 seconds, the same flow, the same brilliance. Every note struck the air with precision, and when she stopped, the hall was silent once more. This time one of the judges stood up. "That piece was considered nearly unplayable at that speed," he said, his voice trembling. "Yet she did it twice." Another judge leaned closer to the others and whispered, "She didn't even need to look at the notes. It's as if she could hear the whole song in her head before she played it." The audience started chanting for an encore. The girl looked confused for a moment, then asked softly, "Can I play something of my own?" The judges nodded immediately. She took a deep breath and began a soft, slow tune, a melody she had written at home, one that spoke of warmth and innocence. It was the complete opposite of what she had just played. The hall, moments ago bursting with energy, now felt calm and peaceful. Her music seemed to touch something deep inside everyone listening. When she finished, the applause was even louder than before. Some people stood on their chairs, others cheered her name. Her parents in the audience had tears streaming down their faces. Her father whispered, "That's our girl," while her mother pressed her hands to her heart, unable to speak. The judges took a while to recover. They huddled together, speaking quietly. The microphones picked up only a few words. Unprecedented, beyond training, natural genius. Finally, the head judge returned to his seat and turned to her. "How did you do that?" he asked gently. The girl thought for a moment and said, "I listened to the music. It was already there. I just played what it told me." The judge smiled faintly, shaking his head in disbelief. "You make it sound so simple," he said. After her performance, she left the stage and walked back to her parents. The moment she reached them, her mother hugged her tightly. The father bent down and said, "You just made history." But the girl didn't seem to understand the weight of what she had done. She just smiled and asked, "Can we go eat now? I'm hungry." Backstage, the other contestants came to her, some clapping her shoulders, others just staring in awe. One older boy said, "I've been playing for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like that." She only smiled politely and said, "I just like to play." Meanwhile, the judges continued talking among themselves. They couldn't explain how she had memorized and performed such a difficult piece in seconds. Some thought she had perfect photographic memory for music. Others believed she had an advanced form of auditory processing that allowed her to see sound. But none of them could truly explain what they had witnessed. When the results were finally announced, no one was surprised. The girl won first place by unanimous decision. The audience cheered wildly as her name was called. She walked up to the stage holding her parents' hands and accepted the small gold trophy with a shy smile. The judges stood to applaud her, something they rarely did. One of them even said aloud, "This is the beginning of a legend." Reporters rushed to get interviews, but the organizers had to guide her out of the crowd. She wasn't used to so much attention. When a reporter asked what she planned to do next, she said softly, "I want to go home and play more piano." That night, back in the hotel room, her parents sat on the edge of the bed, still trying to process everything. The trophy sparkled on the table beside them. Their daughter was sitting by the window, turning the little music box in her hands. The soft tune played quietly as she looked out at the city lights. Her father asked, "How did you do it so fast?" She smiled and said, "It wasn't fast. It just felt right." The next morning, when they were about to leave for home, one of the judges came to meet them. He was an elderly man with kind eyes. He said, "I've judged hundreds of competitions, but what your daughter did was something I've never seen before. Take care of her talent. Don't let the world take it away from her too early." Her parents promised they would. As they traveled back on the train, the girl leaned against her mother's arm, watching the scenery pass by. She didn't look like someone who had just stunned a room full of experts. She looked peaceful, content. She hummed softly, tapping her fingers on her knee as if she was already composing her next tune in her mind. When they reached home, the whole neighborhood was waiting for them. There were flowers, balloons, and cheers. The teacher who had once lent her the piano was crying with pride. "I knew it," she said. "I knew she'd make them listen." The little girl ran to her, hugged her tightly, and whispered, "Thank you for the piano." That evening, the girl sat once again at her old upright piano, the O, with faded keys and small cracks. Her parents watched from the doorway. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and started to play. The sound was soft, full of warmth and joy. It wasn't a competition piece. It wasn't something to impress anyone. It was just her heart speaking again like it always did. Outside, people stopped to listen just like before. The melody floated out through the window, wrapping around the street like a gentle breeze. The girl smiled as she played, completely unaware that her name was already spreading across the country, that people everywhere were talking about the little genius who had done the impossible. To her, it wasn't about fame or trophies. It was simply about the piano, the music, and the feeling that came every time she touched the keys. And deep down, everyone who heard her knew this was only the beginning of something far greater than anyone could imagine. When she finished playing, the sound of the last note seemed to hang in the air for a long time. Nobody moved. Nobody clapped. It was as if the entire hall had forgotten how to breathe. The big lights above the stage shone down on her small figure sitting behind the piano, her little hands resting quietly on the keys. For a few long seconds, all that could be heard was silence. Then, slowly, a soft whisper went through the crowd, a kind of amazed murmur that grew louder and louder. One of the judges leaned back in his chair, his eyes wide open. Another blinked several times as if he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. The third one, the oldest among them, took off his glasses and stared at the girl, trying to understand how an 8-year-old child could possibly do what she just did. The sheet of music they had handed her was still lying on the stand, untouched. She hadn't even needed to look at it. The host of the competition stepped forward, microphone in hand, but he too hesitated. "That was remarkable," he finally said, his voice trembling slightly. The audience broke into applause, soft at first, then thunderous. People stood up from their seats, clapping and cheering. Some even whistled. The girl smiled shyly, almost confused by the reaction. To her, it was just another song. She had played it the way she felt it, nothing more. One of the judges raised his hand, asking for quiet. The applause slowly faded. "Can you play that again?" he asked. His voice was calm, but carried a mix of disbelief and curiosity. The little girl nodded, her expression innocent and fearless. She turned to the piano once more, placed her fingers gently on the keys, and began to play again. This time, the judges watched her every movement closely. Her fingers moved so quickly, yet every note was clear, sharp, and perfectly timed. It wasn't just speed, there was emotion, rhythm, and depth. She wasn't rushing through the piece. She was expressing something only she could feel. The judges exchanged looks, their disbelief growing with every second. When she finished, she looked up at them quietly, waiting for a response. The old judge spoke first. That piece is known among professionals for being almost impossible to play at that speed. It's not meant to be done that way." How did you manage that?" The girl looked at him and said softly, "I just listened to it in my head first. Then I played it." Her answer was so simple that it made everyone in the hall pause again. She wasn't trying to be clever or mysterious, she was just telling the truth. To her, it really was that easy. The judges leaned toward each other, whispering in low voices. The host stood quietly, not daring to interrupt. The audience waited, sensing that something extraordinary had just happened. Then the head judge stood up. He was a man who had trained students for more than 30 years, known for being strict and almost impossible to impress. He looked at the young girl and said, "You have a gift that even most adults can't understand. What you did here today, it might change how we think about music." The crowd erupted again in applause. The girl's parents were in the audience, their eyes filled with tears. They had always known she was special, but seeing her being recognized by professionals made them realize just how far she had come. Her father held her mother's hand tightly. Neither of them could stop smiling. After the performance, several reporters tried to talk to the judges. One of them said, "I've been part of this competition for 15 years and I've never seen anything like this. It's as if the piano was a part of her, not an instrument she was playing." Another judge admitted, "It's not just talent. It's something beyond training, something she was born with." Backstage, the girl sat quietly, holding a small bottle of water. She didn't seem overwhelmed by all the attention. Instead, she asked her mother softly, "Did I make any mistakes?" Her mother laughed and hugged her tightly. "No, sweetheart," she said. "You didn't make any mistakes at all." Outside the hall, people were still talking about her. Some called her a miracle, others a genius. A few skeptics said it had to be luck. But those who had seen her play with their own eyes knew it wasn't luck. It was pure natural talent, something that couldn't be taught or explained. Later that evening, the judges requested to meet her again in a smaller room. She walked in holding her father's hand. The head judge smiled gently at her and said, "We want to understand you a little more. When you play, what do you think about?" The girl thought for a moment before answering. "I don't really think," she said. "I just listen to the music inside me. It feels like it's already there, waiting to come out." Her words left the room silent again. The judges nodded slowly, realizing they weren't just dealing with talent. They were witnessing something rare and natural, something that couldn't be explained by practice alone. One of the younger judges asked, "Do you ever get nervous before you play?" The girl shook her head. "No, I like when people listen. I want them to feel happy, like I do when I play." Her honesty and calmness amazed everyone. Most musicians struggled with pressure, but she treated the stage as if it were her own world, a safe place where nothing could go wrong. That night, videos of her performance began to spread online. Within hours, thousands of people had watched the clip. Some couldn't believe an 8-year-old could play like that. Others commented about how she smiled at the end of the performance, as if she didn't know she had done something extraordinary. Music teachers shared the video with their students, saying, "This is what true connection to music looks like." By morning, news channels were covering her story. The headline read, "8-year-old piano prodigy stuns judges with impossible performance." At school, her classmates were waiting for her. They cheered when she entered the classroom, and even her teacher gave her a small round of applause. But she didn't act differently. She still sat in her same seat, did her homework, and played with her friends during break time. To her, life hadn't changed. She just loved the piano. Meanwhile, the judges continued discussing her performance. They sent the recording to several well-known composers and music professors, hoping for an explanation. One expert said, "It's not just fast, it's perfectly structured. Her timing, her emotional phrasing, it's beyond what a child's brain should process." Another professor suggested her brain might be processing sound patterns at an advanced level, like a language. But no matter how many scientific explanations they came up with, the truth remained the same. She had done something that couldn't be replicated. A few days later, she was invited to perform again, this time for a special concert attended by top musicians. When she walked onto the stage, the audience fell silent. They had all seen the viral video and everyone wanted to witness it in person. She sat down at the piano, took a deep breath, and started playing a soft tune. It wasn't a showy piece this time. It was slow, gentle, and full of feeling. The sound of the piano filled the hall, each note carrying warmth and innocence. People closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Some even cried. When she finished, the applause was even louder than before. Several professional pianists came forward to congratulate her. One of them said, "You reminded me why I fell in love with music." Another said, "You don't just play notes, you tell a story." The little girl thanked them politely, still humble and quiet. She didn't seem to understand how deeply she had touched people. She just loved the piano and the way it spoke for her. Back at home, her parents tried to keep things normal. They didn't want fame to take over her childhood. They made sure she still played with her friends, did her chores, and enjoyed being a kid. Her mother often said, "Talent is a gift, but staying kind is a choice," and she was kind, always. She never showed off or talked about her achievements. When neighbors came by to congratulate her, she would simply smile and say, "Thank you." Then she would run off to play with her younger brother or feed the stray cats behind their house. But deep inside, something was growing. Her love for music was becoming stronger each day. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, walk quietly to the piano, and start playing soft melodies while everyone else slept. The sound would float through the house, calm and beautiful. Her part. Aunts often listened from their room, smiling in the dark. In the weeks that followed, letters and invitations came from around the world, music schools, orchestras, even television shows. But her parents were careful. They didn't want her to lose her joy in the middle of fame, so they only accepted a few small performances, always making sure she had time to rest and play. The judges from the competition often talked about her after she left. One of them said, "I've seen many talented students in my life, but this girl, she's something else. It's not about fame. It's purity. She plays as if the piano is breathing with her." Another added, "Maybe we're the lucky ones to have seen it happen." Her story soon became a symbol of inspiration. People shared it not just for the music, but for what it represented: the beauty of simple passion, the power of innocence, and the reminder that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. That performance, the one that left the judges speechless, became legendary. Musicians tried to recreate it but couldn't match her natural flow. It wasn't technique alone, it was heart, and even though she was only 8, she had already done something that would be remembered for years. A moment when time seemed to stop, when an entire hall was reminded what true art felt like. For the world, she was a genius, but for her family, she was just their little girl, the one who loved the piano, loved to smile, and could turn silence into something beautiful.